At the beginning of each podcast, our musical prelude states, we try to bring you lost knowledge, things forgotten, and the unknown. These are the things that will set the tone. Well, some stories, however, send shivers down our spines upon hearing the murmurings of certain old tales, seemingly forgotten by time. They can defy our definition of evil and stir the emotions of human mankind. Among these is the story of Baba Anujka, an elderly woman whose name defied terror. Her real-life actions brought entire communities to their knees in fear, and whose account still challenges the minds of even the most seasoned criminologists for serial killers. Who was Baba Anujka, and what horrible events did she unleash on those around her? Join us tonight as we unravel the story many have forgotten, and most likely you've never heard. The story of an elderly lady, a serial killer who took the lives of 150 people.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Well, before we get too far, and I'm going to ask Eric here, see if he agrees.
Uh-oh.
Does not every picture of Baba Anujka look like one of the podlings from The Dark Crystal?
I could totally see that.
She looks like one of them little old Jim Henson Muppets.
Kind of withered, hunched back. Yeah.
Like a sweet old granny with a penchant for murder, apparently. Yeah, I had not heard of her. And then we started doing the episode. I started doing the research for the episode. And it has a very interesting story.
A little dark and a little sinister.
I believe she's still classified as the world's oldest serial killer.
And definitely one of the first, I think, women serial killers.
Well, women serial killers are rare. They typically only kill family, is what I understand. And commonly poisoning, which, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Poison is a woman's weapon, which sounds sexist. So,
are you being sexist right now, Bill?
I'll poison some people if you need me to, Eric.
Okay, that'll make it very non-sexist.
This is not a confession, by the way.
Bill will poison you regardless of your sex. He doesn't.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm a dude. I'll poison
That just shows how we roll here.
So, we'll start with, this Anna di Pistoia.
Rolls off the tongue nicely.
Yeah, who would later become known as Baba Anujka. She had kind of a dark secret. And like I said, to those who saw her, she was just looked like this sweet little old lady, this old grandma.
Literally the perfect definition of the sweet little grand lady that lived down the road.
She was always there, ready to help out her friends and neighbors. An amateur chemist and pharmacist, basically. She made potions and
elixirs.
I was going to say
potions.
Well, I was going to say potions and lotions, which comes from it comes from Baldur's Gate. And then my kids, and I played that. But ultimately, she would be convicted of accessory to murder, I believe is what I have written down later on, and would have nicknames such as the Witch of Banat or the Witch of Vladimirovac. She was from the village of Vladimirovac, which was in her lifetime part of the Austrian Empire, Austria-Hungary, and eventually Yugoslavia. And she is said to have poisoned at least 50 people and as many as 150 in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Now, all this area is kind of encompassed by Serbia now.
So let's get into it. Information about her past is sketchy, to say the least, just because of the time.
Well, unlike, I think, a lot of early childhood stories that we've covered of most serial killers here on the show, she was not born into poverty. She wasn't born into abuse, but actually into a wealthy family.
Yeah.
In fact, her father was what was considered a very successful cattle breeder, and he vowed that his daughter would surely not want nor lack for anything that he and his fortunes could provide her. So I'm sensing she was definitely a spoilt little rich girl.
Well, it said she had a comfortable childhood and received a expensive private education.
Yep.
So, I mean, she was given every benefit that
every
he
opportunity
could provide. She attended private school with the children from rich families.
Early on, when she attended the private school that Bill mentioned, really she didn't stand out. There was no special traits or flaws or interests, definitely that would lean us to believe the dark path that lay ahead of her that she would later choose. However, she secretly held strong to the interests of science at this tender age, and one she carefully guarded for fear of that stereotype. Now, here in especially the old world during this time, it was kind of a mixing of the new and the old ways, kind of clashing all around her. She'd also, within about 5 years of attending the private school, she started showing her intelligence and skills. She actually learned fluently to speak 5 different languages by the time she was only 15 years old. It was clear she possessed a sharp, intellectual, adept mind, one that could have made a substantial advancements into society, helping thousands, if not millions, had she not chosen another path later down the road. But this path seemed to be written in the stars, and the old ways seemed to call to her, luring her down a more dark and sinister path altogether. Instead of being welcomed into society for being a young girl with interests in science and an aptitude of intelligence, challenging even most adults and the teachers around her, she found herself kind of cast out from the public. She receded back to the loving family's arms, although internally it is speculated she could have battled with sorrow, anger, and rejection, possibly even depression, in particular from those male peers. Now, she continued to trudge along until this turning point in her life came in her early 20s.
So like Eric said, maybe harboring some resentment, for her life experiences and, basically being ostracized for the things she was interested in. It seemed like when she was 20 years old, like maybe there was another incident which even further pushed her along her path.
Oh, yeah.
When she fell in love with a young Austrian military officer. And I don't have a lot of detail about the relationship, but I know that by the time it was all said and done, he had left her with the gift of syphilis before leaving her brokenhearted.
The gift that keeps on giving with no cure.
Yeah. And after that, she really kind of turned inward and started to turn her back on humanity in general. She started to live a life of seclusion and really kind of doubled down on her interests in medicine and chemistry at that point in time. And
her hatred of men in general, I think.
Yeah. Well, again, she'd been done wrong apparently more than once at this point by other men. Obviously her father did the best he could. She didn't come from like a traumatized childhood, but being ostracized from her peers and then spurned by, this Austrian officer.
Probably one of her first real loves, definitely. Well, it seems she kind of gets a second chance for what we would call a good life. This would be in her 30s of age, late in the 1860s. Kind of unexpectedly, we believe it's through her family that helped arrange a wedding of sorts. I could kind of sense to get that, bitter growing daughter out of the house, so to speak, into a married life of an upper middle class, but a much older man who owned his own farm. Now, the couple did marry. She gave birth to a child, and it should have been a chance for normalcy for Baba Anujka, but it wasn't in the cards, so to speak. The couple had several children, actually.
11 total.
And all but one died in early infancy, until finally her aging husband, now being part of her life for over 2 decades, suddenly also dies in the 1880s. Now, Baba Anujka once again was filled with anger, rage, and questions. Why? Why did she seem to be cursed? What had she ever done to deserve such a life of sorrow? Now, unless Bill uncovered something, to me it was unclear what happened to the one child they said survived.
All I found was that they only had one child that survived to adulthood.
To adulthood, okay. I had went down one rabbit hole, and they thought that the child, may have died in, preteen, adolescence. Or another story said that it was possibly put up to an orphanage, but I couldn't find anything. But you found that it at least did live to adulthood.
And like I said previously, there's a lot of gaps in her history.
Yeah.
Just because of the time frame and, the lack of really good record keeping and all that.
Now, to add insult to injury, both of her parents then passed away during this 20 years that she was married and away from them on her husband's farm, adding even more grief and pain to her life.
Well, after her husband's death, she built a laboratory in her home and began to earn herself a reputation as a healer and an herbalist in the late 1800s, especially popular with farmers' wives and the like who came to her for health problems. And apparently she was able to earn a respectable income and lived comfortably from her herbal trade, making medicines and mixtures for the community.
I think she also kind of helped as a midwife. She even treated some of the livestock, basically whatever she could get.
Yeah. But even then, when she was doing good deeds, they kind of had, sometimes they had maybe a little sinister side to it. One particular specialty of hers was a potion that would make soldiers ill enough to escape military service.
I had read that.
They would get their notice, and then they would take her potion, and it would make them deathly ill, but it wouldn't kill them. And so it would keep them out of service, which, I mean, she's poisoning people at that point, but not to kill them yet.
Now, I have to wonder when I read that, is like, do you think that's these Austrian men coming to her, or their lovers that didn't want to lose their men?
Could be either, I suppose.
These dudes may not have even known, they enroll, they're on their way over and just become deathly ill. They don't understand what's going on.
Well, and that would actually kind of become the MO later on.
Yes.
For an entirely different reason.
For sure.
But she would sell poisonous mixtures, which she branded her magic water or love potions. I believe the local phrase was the Bajana Vodka. She would sell these mostly to married women. Now, her quote-unquote love potions did contain arsenic in a small amount, as well as other poisons such as mercury and tatula plant, which goes by the unassuming name of devil's grass.
Yeah, I come across a section of a story on that part in particular, and I thought this was clever. This kind of goes to lend her thinking. When these women would come to her clients, sometimes visit her in the middle of the night, wanting these love potions and magic waters, she would often ask them something to the effect of, "Tell me what weight this problem carries."
Yeah, another version of that was, how heavy is that problem?
Yes.
And I love that question for what it means.
For what
it's
it truly means. And what she was trying to gain is, how much does this man, this love interest, your husband,
much does your husband weigh?
How much does he weigh? And then privately, she would know how much poison she could mix in that potion elixir. Just enough to kill him, not kill him, whatever the case may be. But I thought that's clever.
And just to appear even more sinister, I think she would give the potion to the lady with instructions for how to properly administer it. And then she would give them a prophecy and basically say, "Oh, I predict your problem will disappear in 8 days." So, and then of course, these gentlemen who found themselves poisoned would get sick and die, usually within that 8-day span.
And then to follow up with that, then some of these women, probably in honesty, innocence, not knowing that they just give their lover or husband poison to kill them, would come to her grieving, and it is said that she would make a special brew of herbal tea, which would calm their nerves.
Well, she got them coming and going.
Oh, my goodness. And some say even hallucinogenic, in which she would then, basically hand to the clutching hands of the grieving widows that sat across from her. And she would say something to the effect, in the flickering candle, "My dear, it was a sign of what was to be. We have no control over the path of which they took. Now go, prepare yourself, and in turn know all that you inherit is well deserved for your work and solitude." Like, wow.
Well, again,
covered her tracks.
Yeah. Well, like we said, she was making a good living doing this and growing her business, so to speak, so that by the 1920s, it had grown so large that she actually brought in what you would call maybe a sales agent. It is a woman named Lubinia Milenkov. And it was her job to find potential clients and bring them to Baba Anujka. Now, her sort of MO, the way she would go about it, is she would just sort of be out in public, and she would overhear in quotes, I would say.
Yeah.
But she would overhear these conversations had, amongst people, and they'd complain about their husband or their
dirty,
boyfriend. Yeah.
Cheating, filthy man.
Whatever complaint they had. then she would approach kind of in a disinterested way and just ask, oh, well, why don't you go see Grandma Anujka?
She's helped a lot of people in the past.
Yeah. Then, of course, she would go back to Baba Anujka before the woman got there and tell Baba Anujka everything she'd heard, so that when the women got there, it would almost seem like Anujka was like
a prophet or seer,
like she could
something.
see the future. She knew that this woman was coming with this problem, and so she would be there ready to help. Now, I was able to find some numbers here, and you'll have to bear with me. These numbers are probably not accurate, but they were sort of the best I could do. I believe the price for the magic water was 2,000 to 10,000 Yugoslav dinars at the time. Now, I was curious, like, how much is she really making? So I started doing some math. Right now, 2,000 to 10,000 dinars is worth $18.50 to about $93.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't sound like a lot. If you use exchange rates and we go back to the time frame, it sounds like she was charging between 50 cents to $2.50. So
good deal.
I don't know money-wise what was what back then, but I mean, according to everything I found, she was living pretty good. So that must have been enough for her to get.
Must have been enough.
And again, this is all based on some let's say spotty math at best on my part. So I could be wrong here.
Now, during this time frame that Bill's talking about, again, haters gonna hate, rumors gonna spread, people's gonna talk.
I think you're too old to use
I'm trying
some
to be
of that phrasing,
Bill, but you just knocked me off my little sawhorse.
I'm sorry. I said something the other day, and my kids were like, "Dad, you're too old to say that."
You're too old. Don't say that again. You're embarrassing me. Regardless, depending on the story and what you want to believe, a lot of people believed this is truly where she committed witchcraft. She was a self-proclaimed witch, so to speak.
What I read was a lot of the people that used her services and bought her potions and stuff, and even some of the people that were associated with her, including her sales agent there, they legitimately at the time did not know they were poisoning people.
Right.
They thought that it was, we'll give them this love potion. I don't know if they thought it was marking them or something, but then Baba Anujka's supernatural abilities were doing the rest.
Yes, it wasn't anything that was, drank. It was all Baba Anujka's powers.
Which I don't think it makes it any better in the end.
But it does help with a little bit more of a perfect tone of a crime, because if you don't know truly what you're doing and you're questioned, then obviously you start to get tripped up. Also during this time frame, you had mentioned, I believe it was Ludvina.
Yeah, Ludvina.
Was one of the first of actually several women that she reached out and kind of became, I liked Bill's phrase, marketing agent or whatever for Baba Anujka. A lot of people also, were talking about this, how many women that she had working with her, beneath her, that would report to her. And again, in my mind, this kind of goes into the whole point of she's building a coven, so to speak. An army of trusted women. Again, we don't trust those guys. We don't trust those men. So it's all about women empowerment. And to Anujka, this was one of the things that she had been slapped down upon all through her private schooling and everything. Again, something very real going on in even today's society, the women empowerment, the women movement. Well, this may have been one of the first recorded instances in a weird, twisted sense of events.
A girl power, female-owned business venture.
Yes, indeed. So I thought that was interesting. Now, one of her early customers during this same time frame, as she was, branching out, starting her coven of these women, the customer comes along, a lady by the name of Stana Mormarov. And again, pronunciations, spellings, and stuff on a lot of these stories vary to some degree. So we're going to butcher some names. Anybody that's listened to us for any period of time know we're really good about that.
Well, and to be fair, in the process of my research, a lot of these names, depending on the source, had different spellings or whatever. So
a lot is lost in translation.
Yeah, sometimes even in the same article, it would have multiple names. It would say, oh, this name or this name. So,
well, Stana, we'll call her.
Yeah.
Stana.
I think they all agree it was Stana.
It was Stana. Was already familiar with Baba Anujka, as early on she had sought out some of her herbal remedies from her before.
It said that Stana had purchased herbal remedies, quote, from her on at least 3 occasions that are known.
Definitely plural, not singular. On January of 1924, Stana purchased some more of these from Baba Anujka's, this magic water potion. Now, I had down that she paid 2,300 dinar.
Yep.
In hopes that it might help her husband, and I'm going to butcher this name too, Lazar Dizdowski?
I have Ladowski.
Okay. We'll settle somewhere in between. Who had been kind of falling under the weather lately. Tragically, his condition had only gotten worse after consuming the magic water potion.
Well, I can't imagine why.
And he quickly passed away. Now, Stana, however, seemed unfazed, possibly acquiring what she may have truly desired after all. She decided she would once again try at holy matrimony just within a few months of her husband's death. Now, quickly, her second husband's uncle would meet a very, very similar demise. Not much time at all after the couple met and was to marry. Some believe he was kind of against this marriage, but now he just was out of the way, so to speak.
And historically speaking, this put 3 roughly similar murders in her orbit,
boom.
if you will.
Yes.
And this drew the attention of authorities.
Very small window of time.
Police would question Stana. And when questioned, she did point the finger at Baba Anujka.
Yep.
But nothing happened at that point in time.
Now, at this time, just to kind of bring everybody up to date, I did a little math here off to the side. Anujka was about the age of 86. So we're well beyond her 30s and 40s. She's pushing 90 years old. But again, with the way that she handled this, there just simply wasn't enough evidence to directly tie these mysterious deaths to Baba Anujka.
To be fair, I mean, there would be very little evidence with
all the way
the sequence of events. I mean, she was giving them the medicine, and unless you were testing the bodies for poison,
and
there would
let's
be no
face
reason.
It, she was still living in her now husband's farmhouse. It was secluded, they said. These women would, journey down this long path to come meet her. There probably wasn't a lot of witnesses. So push comes to shove, it's her word against my word. If they even showed up and bought anything
And that's a defense that Anujka would kind of stand on throughout the whole thing. Like, oh, you got no proof.
Yeah, you got nothing on me. However, when all this did happen, again, people are going to talk, rumors are going to spread. It did seem to take a little bit of a hit on Baba Anujka's growing enterprise, but it did not stop her, barely slowed her, as her ever-growing followers, and again, some would say her coven of witches, continued to grow.
I think really what kind of brings her down ultimately is some magic water she sold in December of 1926. And this was to Sima Momarov and his wife, Sophia. I believe the intent here was to kill Sima's 70-year-old father, Nikla, who was allegedly alcoholic and abusive towards his children and grandchildren. So you can understand why you'd want to take care of a problem like that.
Yes.
Well, Sophia had heard about Anujka from a woman named Danica Stojic, which I'm going to assume was part of...
That was part of her, we'll say coven, because we're talking about witches tonight. So we're going to say coven.
So they went to Anujka, who sold them some of her magic water for 5,000 dinar.
Again, notice the price. And they said that the price bounced all over depending on what Baba Anujka felt was necessary.
Well, and I'm going to say, and I'll kind of hit this in my summary a little later on, I think she was also trying to scale it against what they could afford.
Yeah.
She was being helpful.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, if a poor person came in, she wasn't going to say, it's 5,000 firm, take it or leave it. But yet if a wealthy family came in, then she might drive that price up a little bit more.
Sophia gave the potion to her 16-year-old daughter, Olga Sturza, which would be Nikla's granddaughter, and ordered her to ensure that Nikla drank it. Well, she gave Nikla the poison, who, of course, subsequently fell ill and died after 15 days. So that guy lingered on a little while.
Yeah.
But that was really kind of, that event right there was sort of the end of Baba Anujka. That sort of brought her to the attention of authorities. Now, she did have a previous trial in June of 1914 for providing poison for murders, but there was not enough evidence there.
Nothing stuck.
Like we talked about earlier, there was very little to attach her, so she was acquitted. She was arrested for the second time on May 15th, 1928. At this point in time, she's 90 years old.
right here at this instance, again, people begin to really notice her. Some of the people who didn't notice her beforehand, whispering against this elderly, grandmother, loving, caring type woman who was now being called the Witch of Servia. And just what extremes would people go to satisfy their desires, and who would fall victim to such atrocities? Citizens of the region learned that, Baba Anujka now had this coven of witches at her disposal who lived in almost kind of invisibly amongst the town people, could be the mistress or the lady next door. And this fear, this terror really began to grip the entire region with rumors of, any of these dark witches being able to mark or curse you simply by pointing a finger at you in the crowd. And again, as Bill said, it wasn't like understood, I think, by most people that it was poisoning and potions.
Yeah.
It was more of like what you said, it was just Baba Anujka's powers.
Well, there's literally one story where I guess she was kind of sitting on the sidewalk, if you will, and a happily married couple went by, and she was like, I don't know if it's like a festival or something, but she was handing out lemonade and gave them a spiked drink, if you will.
Oh my.
I mean, for no reason other than were they too happy?
Yeah, think about literally the mindset that this 90-year-old woman would have out here handing poison lemonade out publicly in the street.
She only poisoned theirs.
Theirs.
It wasn't like she was poisoning everybody.
Well,
she only poisoned them.
You said maybe they're too happy. Again, maybe that reminded her of what she got cheated for.
Maybe.
I can't have this,
Well, when Anujka was arrested, they also rounded up Stana, Sofia, and Sima Momarov, Lyubina Milnikov, and Danica Stojic, and Olga Sturza as well. They arrested all of them.
The clan, the coven.
I mean, yeah, these were people that she was helping. These were people that were working with her. They arrested all of them.
They'd had enough.
And
behind bars.
They were all charged with the murders of Nikola Momarov and Lazar Ludowski. So the trial began in June 1929 at the district court in Pansivo and continued to July 1st when results were finally available from the chemical testing of the bodies.
Yeah, they exhumed the bodies, tested them back then.
And testing of the chemicals found in Anujka's house, in her lab. So at that time, the prosecutor and the defense attorneys gave closing statements. Now, the prosecutor sought the death penalty for all of the defendants except for Sturza. If you remember, Sturza was the granddaughter. She was a minor at the time of the murder, and so he was only searching for prison for her. Now, Sofia and Sima defended themselves at the trial. They claimed again, like we said earlier, they did not know the magic water contained poison.
Yeah, they thought it was just plain water.
And that the deaths were the result of Anujka's magic powers.
So tell me, why would you pay 5,000 dinars for a small vial of plain water?
Well, and the other side of the argument is, why is it better that you were paying Anujka to kill them with magic versus poison?
Yeah.
Why did it make it any better? You're still paying her
trying to kill her.
Stana Momarov claimed that she only wanted the magic water to heal her husband from his alcoholism, and she did not know it was going to kill him. Throughout the trial, Anujka constantly denied the charges, claiming she'd never sold any magic water and that the whole case against her was made up by Lyubina, who wanted to blame Anujka for her own crime.
Now, this is kind of where this Lyubina is said that she she pointed the finger at Baba Anujka, and they said that she stood up with kind of like fire in her eyes and literally pointed at her and said, she's trying to make me out to be the bad person. And in her mind, some believe that Lyubina was, this old woman's done. She's old. I am going to take the spot. So it's kind of this rivalry between witches, if you will.
Sturza would also defend herself, the granddaughter, claiming that she was still a child at the time and she was not aware the water was going to kill her grandpa. Sofia testified that Sturza was well aware of what was going to happen the whole time. So, I mean, again, at 16 years old here in America, you can still be tried as an adult if you knew what was going to happen.
Just a sweet little grand lady, grandma selling water.
Ultimately, Dr. Branko Verdelja, an expert witness, testified that traces of arsenic were found in the bodies of both victims. And of course, Baba Anujka had a store of arsenic in her laboratory. And so on July 6, 1929, the verdict was delivered. Anujka was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the role of accomplice in both murders. Now, this is a woman who may potentially have poisoned, either directly or indirectly, up to 150 people.
Yeah.
She gets 15 years for being an accomplice.
Every 10, you get 1 year.
Yeah. Stana and Sofia were sentenced to life in prison since they were considered the main perpetrators. Sima got 15 years and Lubina got 8. Olga and Danica were both acquitted. Now, of course, both prosecutor and the defendants appealed the verdict. I would say the prosecutor felt that they didn't get enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, as the defendants, they felt they were unjustly accused. After all, they hadn't meant to kill anyone. They just poisoned them, right?
Yeah.
So another trial took place at the end of November 1929, with the prosecutor demanding capital punishment for everyone. Like, they all, throw the book at. After cross-examination, Sima and Sofia admitted that they knew about the poison from the beginning, but everybody else stood on the original testimony. The verdict was delivered November 30th. Anujka was resentenced to 15 years hard labor. Stana and Sofia.
Hard labor is a 90-plus-year-old
90-year-old woman.
What does that even mean? Get up out of your bed. That's hard labor.
Stana and Sofia were resentenced to life. Sima, her sentence was increased from 15 years to life, and Lubina's was increased from 8 to 10 years. And then again, Sturza and Danica were acquitted. Anujka would spend her sentence in the women's prison in, Pozyorivak. That is wrong.
I'm glad you got that word.
But she was released in 1936 due to old age after 8 years of her 15-year sentence. Now, when visited by journalists after her release, she maintained her innocence and denied participating in any poisoning. And Anujka would pass away 2 years later in her house in Vladimirovac on September 1st, 1938, at the age of 100.
Now, I had mentioned before that this could have been some of the first stages of, women empowerment, and Baba Anujka, I won't say had the best interest in mind, because obviously she's killing people, but in her mind, I don't think she could have realized how this could all backfire so negatively towards that concept. It's kind of ironic, but because of this occurring, any other women healers in the area, legitimate women healers, practicing nurses, doctors, whatever, kind of got the backhand. They didn't want any women treating anyone in the region because of this. So it kind of definitely backfired on what she was trying to do. Interestingly enough, with this plague of deaths called forth by Anna, it set also a weird twist of events of a new way to study early criminal field of investigations. Definitely more elaborate testings was needed, understanding poisons that could be the underlying cause of a death, where beforehand, that really wasn't thought of, or definitely wasn't something that they normally tested for. This launched what would become modern-day forensic science in the criminal field, which was, born out of necessity to better understand serial killers and harbingers of death in the region. Also, many families later came forward, stating not always was the kiss of death delivered by Anujka a quick one, but all too often, most likely attributed to that measure of a man that we talked about, how much does this trouble weight you, could be prolonged, drawn out, and quite, agonizing pain over a period of days or weeks. You said the one gentleman was like
15 days.
15 days.
Which is over 2 weeks.
Yeah, it wasn't like they just were sleeping the whole time and eventually passed away. They said there was screaming, violent fits, clawing of the skin, blood vessels rupturing in the eyes. And again, this may have just been, her way of torturing men, especially, because like 90% or more of her victims were men.
Well, if you'll indulge me, I kind of went a different way here with my I kind of looked at the whole thing, and after reading it and wrapping my mind around it, I wanted to say that, while in the strictest sense, she was a serial killer,
mm-hmm.
she was at least partially responsible for the deaths of up to as many as 150 people.
Facts.
To most of those people that not to the people she killed, but to the people that she provided the poison to, she was helping them. I mean, the first, we talked about keeping the soldiers from going to war.
Right.
She saved those young men from dying for something they may not have believed in. I mean, we always say, the poor man fights the rich man's war. So, maybe they didn't want to go.
I see where you're coming from.
And later on, she was helping women out of domestic abuse situations at a time where women were beaten, exploited, and forced into marriage, treated like property.
And people just looked the other way.
Yeah, she offered them an alternative. It was a sinister alternative.
But nonetheless, it was an alternative.
She was still helping them out of their situation. So I don't want to say she was a bad person. I want to say there's some gray.
You don't want to say she's a good person.
She poisoned and killed people. She's not perfect. Again, the happy couple.
We all have our flaws.
Yeah, the happy couple that she poisoned with lemonade, supposedly.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a little wild.
They didn't ask for that.
Well, until you shared that story, which I hadn't come across, I was actually kind of in your same boat, and I had some closing comments here that kind of the same way. And my statement was, it wasn't like she went out and hunted people. No. It was people came to her that were troubled
to solve a problem.
With the exception of the lemonade couple, maybe,
And without having all the details, who's to say? There may have been more, and maybe the lemonade story is all a fiction. Who knows? But I think, you do have to take it with, you have to look at both sides of that. She was helping people. She helped those soldiers. She helped those women out of bad situations. The one guy was a abusive alcoholic, and she's just, provided them with the means to take care of that problem. Did she go and get him, therapy and get him out of his addiction? No. She did it with the, just take him out of the picture.
Taking care of business. Well, regardless, she did for sure leave an everlasting scar on the Bene region of Serbia that is still well remembered there today. Now, something here in the States, I hadn't come across this story. I stumbled across it when I brought it to Bill. And, I would dare to say, I would say most of our listeners out there weren't familiar with this story at all. But this is a true, factual, there's enough documented facts here that we know she was a serial killer. 100 people, 150 people. Really, does it matter? A serial killer, if it was...
I think they can directly attribute 50 to her in some way.
Yeah.
And then as many as 150 based on the circumstances of death and stuff at the time.
So. She definitely, as we said, had a clever way of removing herself from, I wasn't ever there. I didn't even meet the victims, didn't know necessarily what the victims even looked like. She just wanted to know how much they weighed. Now, a lot of the story I like to try to tie back through here has, earned a place in history books, identified as the Bene witch, the witch of Serbia. And what exactly does Baba mean? In that language, it is the meaning of an old woman or witch. And for those of you who are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons lore, we have, Bill?
I was going to fill in the blank because I know where you're going, but that predates Dungeons and Dragons. You know that.
Oh, I know.
Okay. But the Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga's hut.
That's John Wick.
For those of you who aren't familiar or don't play D&D, Baba Yaga's hut, you talk about a weird, twisted thing. It's a thatched hut with giant chicken legs.
And much like the TARDIS, it is much larger on the inside than is the outside.
And it just walks around the forest.
And apparently her and Hellboy have beef. So
Yes. I love to see that come to the big screen in Hellboy. They're like, oh, yes, Baba Yaga's hut. Anyhow, a lot of the story of Baba Anujka, you have to consider a lot of it has been polluted, possibly filling in the gaps with folklore to better understand and share, through time. All we do know that, early medicine, certainly, at least in some portion, came from the old herbal remedies, often labeled at one time dark magic. In a time of the old ways, it was fading and being feared with new science, which was equally misunderstood and feared by many at the time. So the lines can easily become blurred and lost.
Is it time for headlines, Eric?
I would like to do some headlines. Well, my headline comes from CBS News, an article published November 14th, 2023, not all so long ago. And it says, jury finds Wisconsin woman guilty of poisoning friend with eye drops.
Wow.
Yeah. So it says, a Wisconsin woman has been found guilty of poisoning her friend with eye drops, officials announced Tuesday.
I knew eye drops would create let's say, an uncomfortable reaction in the stomach, which led to bathroom trips.
I didn't know it could kill you, though.
I didn't know it would be fatal.
Yeah.
How much does it take? Are we going to say?
Oh, I'm not going to get into those kind of details. We're not that type of podcast, Bill. We'll be under censorship. A jury found 39-year-old Jesse, and I believe you pronounced the name Kurziski, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of theft in the 2018 murder of her family friend, Lynn Hernan. This was in the Waukesha County District Attorney's Office, said a press release. Now, Hernan was found dead in her condo in October of 2018 with crushed medicine on her chest. According to a criminal complaint, Kurzaski called the police and said her friend wasn't conscious or she wasn't breathing. Said that she was a family friend and had been checking on Hernan daily. She said that there was possibly a suicide that had occurred in the condo. Now, the Waukesha County Medical Examiner ruled Hernan's death a homicide after discovering, and I'm horrible with medicine names as well as any name, tetrahydrozoline, an ingredient in Visine eye drops in Hernan's system. When investigators told Kurnoski that Hernan was poisoned at the scene, was staged to look like a suicide, thus with the crushed medicine on her chest like she had overdosed with something. She said it was that Hernan wanted, and she must have staged her own suicide, according to the complaint. Now, Kurzoski later told investigators she brought Hernan a water bottle loaded with 6 bottles worth of Visine. So there's your answer.
Lord.
Yes, we are going to share that. 6 bottles of Visine in I'm assuming a standard water bottle. I would think you could taste that.
I was going to say, doesn't Visine have a taste?
What would that be? Like at least a 16th of a bottle?
No, this water tastes funny. Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah, spit that stuff out. Detectives also eventually concluded that Kurzoski stole $290,000 from Hernan. So, hey, good friend, let me steal some money from you.
That's how much a human life is worth to that woman.
Apparently, she needed to go buy more Visine. Prosecutors said they were satisfied with the verdict and offered condolences to Hernan's family. The verdict today is a step towards closure for those who grieve for Lynn, and it sends a clear message to the community that our society will not tolerate the act of taking someone's life. Abby Nikolai, the county deputy district attorney, said during a statement. Now, Kurnoski is set to be sentenced on December 7th, 2023, which obviously is coming past. The homicide charge requires a mandatory life sentence as well as an additional 10 years of imprisonment for each count of theft, the prosecutors said. So, again, not trying to make light of this. This is a tragic case, but I stumbled across this and I was just like, how can you die of eye drop poisoning? I didn't think it was a thing.
Well, and how did she think she was going to get away staging it? Is she never seen a police procedural show?
Apparently she didn't watch much crime TV.
No CSI for her.
Yeah, no CSI for her. But, I mean, that was her best friend. Wow.
From ladbible.com by Lucy Devine, March 16th, 2024. Horrific crimes of serial killer who appeared on Quiz Show while police hunted him down.
Say what?
So these names are all from France, and I don't speak French. When Francois Verove took part in a quiz show in France in 2019, nobody could have imagined that he was a serial killer, even though he appeared just like any other contestant. He had, in fact, been on the run from police for the last 30 years at that point.
30 years.
A former police officer himself, he lived in southern France with his wife and children when he took part in the quiz show named Tout le monde veut pindre sa place.
Okay.
Maybe. I should have looked up a translation. I did not.
We're going to go with that.
Only after his death in 2021 did the truth about his dark past come out. He was suspected of sexually assaulting and murdering children and adults throughout the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
During the investigation of the assault and murder of a 13-year-old girl, residents recalled seeing a man with pockmarked skin. Luc Richard, the victim's older brother, told the Sud-Ouest newspaper, "He seemed very sure of himself. He spoke to me in a very bold, very polite way, too. He said something to me like, 'Have a very, very good day.'" I mean, just
have a very, very good day.
During the manhunt, police, who believed their suspect to be one of their own at the time, described the perpetrator as Le Grele, the pock-marked man, due to his acne-marked face. He was also the suspect of 2 other murders in 1987 and was believed to have assaulted at least 2 other children and suspected of having committed a total of up to 31 murders and assaults through 1994. Now, shortly before his death, authorities had managed to establish a DNA profile of their suspect, and all police officers who had been deployed in Paris at the time of the murders would need to be questioned. Varov was one of these officers, and although he was summoned on September 24th for questioning, a few days later he was reported missing by his wife. He was later found at a rented apartment in a nearby fishing village where he had taken his own life. Prior to his death, he left a note for his wife where he confessed to the heinous crimes he had committed. And then, in his own words, quote, "There were times when I couldn't stand it, and I had to destroy, sully, kill someone innocent." He wrote this as a way of explaining, his past impulses.
Wowza.
And said that ever since then, he'd been trying to bring them under control. In the letter, he admitted to the murders, but didn't include specific details about victims. However, police took samples and found that his DNA did match the profile at a number of the crime scenes. So while on the run, this guy managed to get on television.
Why?
And participate in a game show.
Why would you do that?
When you're a criminal,
you feel cocky.
You don't bring attention to yourself.
Yeah.
So I thought about this, and I had to be careful how I worded it. And I asked that you be careful how you answer.
Okay.
Without naming names.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Have you ever met or interacted with someone that you were sure could be a serial killer?
Oh, that took a different turn.
Oh,
okay.
What were you expecting?
Without naming names, is there anyone that you really wanted to poison and knock off or something?
Jeez, Eric.
Well, wow, Bill.
I'd like to think you're not that kind of guy.
Well, wait till you get to my question. Well, being involved in retail, literally most of my life. Again, not naming any names, keeping very vague.
Yeah, keep it vague. I don't want you to call anyone out.
You meet some strange people. I mean, strange. And it's just more of that, for lack of a better term, spidey sense that just goes off. Here at Ravensloft, when we were open, we had a young couple that came in. The female was a goth, and more power to whatever, your beliefs are. But what was disturbing was that she entered our front door on her hands and feet walking like a dog. And she had a spiked collar on and a dog leash, being led by presumably the male figure boyfriend.
Eric, are we kink shaming now?
No, follow me. Keep up with me.
Okay.
We're not even talking about the awe, shock, but I've got 35, 40 people in here playing an innocent game of Magic the Gathering, and this occurs at about 11 p.m. at night. Needless to say, gameplay stops. People turn,
but
look.
You stop and look.
Yeah.
I have a story I'll tell after, but, finish your story and then I'll tell you.
The boyfriend, because I don't think they were married, the boyfriend that is leading his girlfriend on a leash was more disturbing than her, because he put off that vibe that this poor girl, woman, whatever possessed her to do this, was definitely under his spell. She was below him. He made that very clear. You stay down there. You stay on the floor. Just very downplaying, creepy as, pardon French, creepy as hell. And just the way he treated her and spoke definitely gave me the vibes that, this may not be his first victim, and she may be a victim by the end of the night. Now, I did see her years later. So, and I will say I did learn that she had some drug problems, and she is working on trying to get those straight. So, that's a great thing, but that's where I was going. Not so much with the whole aw-shuck appearance, but I needed to paint that picture for you to fully understand where he was coming from. But yeah, he was like, you stay down there on the floor, and use some derogatory names. And and literally was treating her like a dog. And it was a hot topic for quite some time.
So before I answer my own question, you were talking about the things you encounter in retail. Of course, my son works for a local business. I'm not going to name names, but he came home last night and we asked him how his night went, how things went at work. And he tells us a couple things, and then he goes, and somebody brought their pet monkey in, and then he just glossed over that and we're like, whoa.
Rewind.
First of all, when I ask you how your day has gone and you encounter a monkey, you start with, somebody brought in a monkey.
Somebody brought in a monkey. We're going to talk about the monkey.
And second of all, you don't skip past that. Like, there's not more detail that I need. So me and my other son, we kind of interrogate him we're like, what was it? What kind of monkey? How big was it? What was it doing? And he's like, well, the lady was pushing it around in a stroller. And I'm like, you just left that part out? She's pushing it around in a stroller.
Dude, you got the best story of the night, maybe the week, maybe the month right here.
And we're like, did you see it? He's like, yeah. She walked right up the aisle past me, and this monkey's just reaching out, grabbing things. And I'm like, I would not have expected that. But I guess we did have a monkey on the loose a few years back here in town. Somebody had lost a pet monkey. So I remember that headline popped up while I was on vacation out of state.
I know the local pet shop owner has owned several pet monkeys. So I've got to see a few of those up close.
So have I ever met someone, serial killery?
Mm-hmm. Or that you felt was?
There was this gentleman, a young man. I was much younger. This was over 20 years ago. And I had a friend I was hanging out with quite a lot. This was when I was playing Vampire the Masquerade and other things. We weren't playing Vampire at the time. We were playing Marvel Superheroes was the game at the time.
Good game. TSR.
Yep. And he had this way of attracting these sort of social outcasts, my friend did, and he invited this gentleman over. It was going to be an all-night game session. We were all going to be staying over at his place.
I was going to say at your house, probably.
No, he had a 3-bedroom place that he was sort of renting from his parents at the time. And this guy, I mean, just to look at him, was sort of kind of unkempt with like the greasy hair that was like combed over, and the little tiny mustache that people have a nickname for these days that I'm not going to get into. And, I mean, while I can't swear to it, I would swear he was wearing like the 3 Wolf Moon shirt unironically. Like, this dude was all about wolves and werewolves and things, and just fascinated by it. And when we played the game, he had almost an obsessive knowledge of like certain topics, and always wanted to bring the conversation back to those topics, even when they didn't have anything to do with the game. And finally, like as we got to the end of the day, I'm like, well, surely, my buddy's going to give this guy a ride home. No, he's just like, I'm too tired. Let's just everybody crash here, which I had already planned on staying. So I went.
Now you're doubting your decision of staying.
I like went back to the back bedroom and like locked it and like wedged something under you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I don't know this dude. Like, this is weird.
The paranoid version of Bill.
Throughout the night, he went through my collection of gaming books and read them.
Oh, you don't do that.
What kind of psycho does that?
You don't do that.
So, like, I did not know he had done this. This was not, like, pre-planned. This was like, hey, do you mind?
That is, like, for a game master, that is worse than a stranger going through your underwear drawer.
I went to bed, left my books out there in a book bag, and woke up to him, like, quizzing me about things that were in those books.
Well, Bill, I'm going to discipline you here. How dare you call yourself a game master when you left your children all of your books in a duffel bag outside of your protected domain?
Historically speaking, in this situation, that is where those books would have been, and no one else would have touched them. This weirdo
until this
that
night.
My friend brought into the mix, that guy, and he was like devoid of emotion.
He touched
my
stuff.
He didn't get excited. He didn't get happy. If he rolled a critical hit, which you can't roll in Marvel, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When he rolled well, he didn't react to that. When he rolled bad, he didn't react to that.
To emotionless,
if I had ever met someone that might be a killer, that was the guy.
Did you ever get to play with him again or see him again?
I refused. I was like,
so he was around. You just chose.
My buddy was like, oh well, we could always. Nope, don't call that dude. No, don't bring him over.
That dude touched my stuff while I was
pretty
asleep.
Much. That dude touched my books.
All right. Well, I am definitely going to go a bit to the dark side here, as one might expect on a serial killer episode involving poison. This is my question. If for some theoretical reason you needed or wanted to poison someone here in Missouri with only the knowledge you have right now and the skills that you possess right now, how might you do it? Because, Baba Anujka, she had several decades to plan and, learn the trade. Well, you and I are, we're a little bit more sheltered. We play D&D, we're geeks, but so if you had to, and I put that in there so we don't seem quite as sinister.
Well, see, now you're going to get me caught if I ever do it.
Well, that's the point. I want to know if it's me, Bill.
I would find a way to subtly introduce blood pressure medicine because I happen to know that my blood pressure medicine, if you take enough of it, will cause a heart attack.
Yeah.
And so for all outward appearances, it would appear as a heart attack. Now,
I follow.
I would have to find a way to get them to take that much of it, which means I would probably need to put it into something, obviously. I'm not going to hand someone
it up.
I'm not going to hand someone a handful of pills and be like, "Here, take all these."
Yeah, take all these.
But yeah, with what I have available in my knowledge, that would be the way.
And I wanted to say, if needed to be, like, because maybe someone breaks into your house and, they're holding your family captive. I
don't think it works that fast, but probably. I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, for me, answering the same question, I've only very recently this week learned of a new way.
Oh, so you studied.
And because this was a topic that obviously we pre-discussed and was working on, for whatever reason, at night, my mind went here. And it's like, wow, okay. My wife, Sarah, and I have been interested in a long time about, foraging for plants and growing herbs, garden stuff. Here in Missouri, we have a host of natural herbal stuff that's out there. And Sarah in particular, my wife, is very interested in this kind of stuff. So one day, this last week, we decided we're just going to take a drive. We went down out by some of the river accesses and was looking around. She had read about one particular plant, and it was the stinging nettle plant. And both of us kind of chuckled that, our family told us, stay away from that because it has like these little prickly cactus-like barbs and, they sting. Obviously, that's where it gets the name stinging nettle. But she had read and been reading in books and online that this plant has a lot of things for like arthritis and aching joints if you dry it and all this. So we're out there looking for this. Well, we didn't find that, but we found this huge crop of what we thought was another herb, Queen Anne's lace, or another plant also similar to that called cow parsley. Queen Anne's lace, great little story there. When it's in bloom later on in the year, white flowers, it has a red or purple dot right in the center, and that was because of Queen Anne's love, supposedly, of making lace, and she pricked her finger and a single drop of blood, stained it. So that was kind of a cool story. But so I took some pictures. We didn't actually take any of this, but we're still learning the proper identification. Thank God we did. So we go back to the house. I go back and I really start researching it. And, quickly learn we don't know squat about this. Stinging nettle looks nothing like Queen Anne's lace or cow parsley. So it's like, okay, yeah, we definitely need to. Good thing we didn't harvest this. But we come across what this plant really is, which ironically looks just so similar to either the Queen Anne's lace or the cow parsley, and that is poison hemlock.
Wow.
Obviously, hemlock, that goes way back in history books. We learned that until it blooms, which is like in May or June, these plants, by looking at the leaves, even a expert would have difficulties to distinguish, just looking at the leaves, the difference between these three plants, two of which are edible and good, and one literally will kill you, obviously the hemlock. I later learned, and it was because of some of the pictures that I took, the hemlock on the stems is perfectly smooth, doesn't have like any little prickly spikes or anything like that, but it has little purple polka dots, kind of some streaks. And I'm like, first thought, I'm glad I took a close-up of that, so I know that. As I read on, it says like 10 to 15% of the people who touch the plant can get that poison in their bloodstream and possibly die.
Wow.
I'm like, maybe it wasn't so good that I took that close up, because obviously I touched it. Luckily, I'm still here, so I wasn't one of the 10%. Then I get to reading that after it blooms, if a forest fire came along or someone was trying to do a controlled burn, inhaling the smoke has the same effect. However, it's much quicker because it's coating the inside of your lungs. And then I go online, I'm following this rabbit hole, I'll go to the Missouri Conservation Department. And like 2 years ago, they released this statement that Missouri is under attack by the poison hemlock, the most invasive plant. It grows in every ditch. It grows along the creeks, the rivers, and how many people are confusing it and, all this. And I'm like, well, just how bad can this poison hemlock be? We're in Missouri, of all places. I mean, this stuff's everywhere. There is no cure.
What are the symptoms?
Okay. It depends on who you are as to how it affects.
Awesome.
But the best description that is still staining my brain from reading, imagine yourself being slowly dipped into a warm pool of water where the water touches, you go totally numb, starting with your toes, and it moves up your legs, and you're waiting, hoping quickly that it gets to your heart and lungs because the pain is excruciating, like being bathed with acid from the inside.
Wow.
Now, upon getting to your heart and lungs, your body starts to cease to be able to breathe. But your brain, of course, is still trying to deal with this. Blood vessels will rupture. Your throat and larynx will swell shut. If you're lucky enough to get to a doctor, they will try to shove something down your throat because I guess the swelling is so quick and so intense that it can actually crush small tubes inserted down your throat.
Wow.
To hope that they can keep enough air going through. Then they will inject you and try to flush your body out as quickly as they possibly can before it reaches your brain, where then you will finally die this horrific death.
Okay, as you were, building up to that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I've been out in the woods so many times. I wonder if maybe I got sick one time and that's what it was.
Yeah.
But clearly, I have never had those symptoms.
And then the question comes to my mind is like, if this is everywhere, and I kid you not, there was a patch the size of a school bus within 50 foot of where we parked our cars on the state property, river access. I mean, this isn't like we waded out through the water into the woods in the back 40. No, it's a stone throw's distance from the highway. Why don't we hear more about it?
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's weird. So, long story, but answering, I now know where poison hemlock is.
I know where to get that.
I know I need to wear gloves, but yeah, apparently if you were just out and, how you see in the movies, they take a little pinch off the leaf and they put it in your mouth. That's all it would take.
Wow.
I mean, just a little. And then because it's so strange, they don't test for it a lot of times. So that'd be a good way, just saying. And I'll shut up now.
Now I know who my dealer is.
Well, we hope that we have terrified you, interested you, sparked your imagination, but mostly shared a story that was almost forgotten in time from Baba Anujka, the Witch of Servia. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys. Now, one of her early customers during this same time frame as she's building her network, her coven, so to speak, there was a new client, a woman by the name of Stana Morinroff.
I have that. That's 1924.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the first, that's sort of the beginning of her downfall, is what I have.
Yep.
And I have Momirov. Momirov.
Us and our different pronunciations.
Well, no, a lot of these things were written different places, so I'm not saying you made a mistake.
Morinroff is what I
have Momirov.
Momirov. I like that better. We're going to try to do that.
Yeah, that's just what I have. And like I said, I'm not faulting you or anything. I found multiple spellings for a lot of these things. After spending 18 years of her 15-year sentence. Now, when visited by journalists at the time
hold
of
on.
her...
You said 18 years of her 15-year sentence.
8 years. Did I say 18?
I think you said 18.
Now, during the manhunt, Man.
This one time when I was policed.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.